Hey everyone, welcome to this video tutorial, and we are going to be covering some beginner principles of pure CSS images. And by the end of this tutorial, we're going to be creating this nice little cute koala we see here. Now, the reason I'm making this is I actually have an article which you're going to want to open now, and it's going to be right in the comments of this, or not comments, it's going to be right in the description of this video. So go ahead and open this up, and we're going to be walking through it. I'm pretty much going to be talking through the article, so you don't really need to be reading too much, but it does have the source code, which we're going to be pulling from, and we're going to code it together. So if you want to open up CodePen, codepen.io, create an account if you haven't already, pause this video, and then once you're ready, we're going to go hit a new pen, and then I just called it Koala Pure CSS Tutorial, and we're going to go ahead and code it as we go through this nice blog post that I wrote up, again, which is in the description. I'm going to open it up now. Okay, so enough for setup, and let's get to the meat of this video tutorial. First component or shape that I want to go over is just going to be what's going to be the background of our pure CSS image. So I highlighted it with a white border, but it's just going to be an invisible box. And the reason we're going to use that invisible box is because we're going to just simply position this box, not absolutely by percentage base, we're just going to use some tricks to automatically align it in the center. And then once it's aligned in the center, when we're creating these different shapes and these different components and putting it all together, we're going to be positioning them on a percentage, and we're going to give them a size, both height and width, and it's going to be based off of this box instead of based off of the entire body. So this will make a little more sense when you kind of talk about the HTML and then actually get to the styling. The next component of our actual koala is going to be just this light gray circle. We're then going to have two ears on each side, and each ear is going to be composed of two circles. We're going to have one bigger light gray circle, and then we're going to stack on top of it one darker shade gray circle. And then we're going to have two eyes on each side. Obviously, we're going to have a larger white circle, and then we're going to have this smaller black pupil. And then for our nose, we're just going to have a rounded rectangle, and we're going to position that right in the center of the head and give it nice brown tints. Lastly, we just have two triangles, and that's going to represent our hair. So now that we've gone through all of the components, let's go through the HTML. So for the HTML here, let's first just copy this, and I'm going to paste it into CodePen. All right, it's pretty straightforward. Just for every component that we talked about, there's going to be a div and a class. And so we have box, we have our head, we have our ear, ear for each side, and then there's just, for instance, for here, ear, there's that outer ear that we had, and then there's going to be this inner ear. So this is going to be your outer light gray circle. This is going to be their inner dark gray circle. That's going to make the look of an ear. Everything's pretty straightforward in terms of that. There is this head copy. I'm going to get to that later and explain why that's there. But the only major thing you really need to know about the HTML is just understanding why certain divs are nested under parent divs. All of these divs that we have are underneath our box, and the reason that's important is because that means when we give, for instance, our head, and we give that a percentage for its position and for its size, it's going to base it off of, it's going to be relative to the box and not to the body. So for instance, the body's going to be way bigger than our box. So when we position our head, it's just a lot easier to be positioned off a smaller box than it is to be this big body. And the same thing can be applied, for instance, when we have one of our ears. So we have this inner ear that's nested around our ear right. So instead of having this inner ear that's going to be based off of where our head is, so it's not going to be given a size that's relative to head, it's going to be given a size and a position that's relative to ear right. So to get to our CSS styling, The first thing we're going to do is going to be pretty simple. We're going to be giving a body with a background color of this Twitter blue. Nothing too complex there. So next we have this invisible box, like I mentioned, we're going to be making. So we have our box. Our box is going to be underneath our body, and so we're going to give it a position of relative. So we're not going to be giving a position based off percentages, but we're simply going to do margin auto and display block. By adding those two lines of code, it's going to vertically center this box. We're then going to give it a width of 600 pixels, a height of 420 pixels, and this margin top here just means it's going to be 8% from the top. And then since I gave it a background here of white, we're going to be able to see this box. So here it might make a little more sense. So we have this smaller box, so we're not going to position everything off of this body. We're going to position off the box. You can either leave it white so you can kind of see how it's positioned based off of the box, or you can go ahead and set it to none, which we'll need to do in the end. Just to make it simpler as far as seeing the visualization of it, I'm going to leave it white for now. So next we're going to move on to head. So here's our head code. I'm going to paste into here and then break it down. All right, so here we have a position absolute. And so since this head div is nested under box, we're going to give it a percentage of both top and left, depending, that's going to be relative to our box. So here we give it a top of 16.5%. So it's 16.5% below. And they give it a left of 25%, which means it's 25% to the left. You'll notice that this is smack dab in the center. And so there's actually a way that we can calculate that. But how we calculate that is actually based off our width and our height. So if you're going to be dead centering something, it makes more sense to do the width and height first, and then doing the top and the left using a formula I'm going to give to you. As far as how I got the width and the height, to be honest, I really don't have anything that's particular or specific in the way I do that. If someone does, I'm open to suggestions, but for me, it's usually just trial and error. And a width of 50% and a height of 67% is just what I came up with, and what makes for a good circle. The reason it's still a square is because we haven't added anything to transform this shape. So whenever you make something with your CSS code, it's always going to be a rectangle no matter what. The only time it'll take a different shape is if you add something that's going to transform it. So you're always going to have one line of code that's going to be what transforms your shape from a rectangle to a circle. So in this case, for a circle, it's going to be border radius 50%. And what that's going to do is it curves the edges of our rectangle and finds it down to a circle. So there we can see that circle worked. And then let's talk about this top and the left and how I came up with those. So in this article I wrote, you can see right here is this helpful dead center formula. So for the left, do 100 minus the width, which was 50, divided by 2, which gives us a left of 25%. And then top, we do 100 minus height, so 100 minus 67 divided by 2, which gives us 16.5%. We plug those in, and then we have it right smack dab in the middle, and that is our head. So next we have a head copy, and I don't want to get too confused, or I don't want you to get too confused about why this is in here, but the main thing you want to understand is all I did is I gave it a width and a height of 100%. Since it's nested under head, it's going to be an exact replica of what we just made. Again, it has a border radius, which makes a circle, and we give it the same color. The only thing that's different is we give it a z-index. So z-index, if you're familiar with Illustrator or Photoshop, this will make a lot of sense. It's like your layers. So the smaller the number is, the closer to the bottom that layer is. So we give this a z-index of 2 because it's on the second it's one above our head. So I just did a z index of 2. And so when we do all these other components, like our eyes and our nose, and are going to go right on top of this head. So we're going to give it a higher z index because it's going to be a higher layer, higher in the sense that it's going to be closer to the top. The reason we use head copy is because if we didn't have head copy, then for instance, we'll see when we have our ears are going to be positioned behind this head. And so it wouldn't work unless we had this head copy. It's kind of one of those things where just kind of, I don't want to get too technical in explaining it. Just kind of assume that it's needed, and it'll make sense once we style our ears. So next we'll do our ears. So let's go to our ears. All right, here's the code. We have, again, for our ears, we're going to have an ear to the left and an ear to the right. So let's copy that and we'll paste that in here, and then we'll break it down. I'm going to get rid of this. All right. So here we have our ears, and because I just removed that border radius, which is our transformer of the shape, it's going to automatically be a rectangle. So if we add those back in there, it will get us a nice circle. Wait for it. There we go. So there we have both of our ears positioned on the left and on the right. So let's go to the positioning. So here I introduced something a little different. Well, first the width and the height, should explain that. So the width is, because the ear left is nested under head, we give it a width that's 60% of the head, and we give it a height that's 65% of the head. Again, this is just mostly just trial and error. For top and the left, it is not something we're going to dead center, so we're not going to use any formula. So I kind of just, by trial and error, just thought 5% from the top is a good distance of what I wanted. And then for our left, I introduced something different, which is a negative percentage value. Let me do this. So I'm going to give this a left of 0, and I'm going to change the color so we can see it. All right. I'll just leave it like that. So it's starting at the left, which is 0%. So it's going to be right here. So basically, we use a negative when you want it to be sticking out. That's not a very technical term, but once we give it a negative, it's going to expand outside of what our parent div. So here our parent div is head, so we want this ear to be sticking out. So we just do negative, so we're going to be pushing this out, but it's easier, in my opinion, to be sizing this ear based off of the head, and then we can simply just use a negative percentage to be sticking out the way we want it to look. As far as how I got negative 20 precisely, again, it was just trial and error. I thought it sticked out. I did the left ear and thought it stuck out the amount that I wanted. And then what I did for my right ear is I can simply just have copy and pasted this, given the position of right. And the only thing that's going to change, because it's the same position from the top, is going to be right. So instead of going negative 20% to the left, it goes negative 20% to the right. Or from the right, I should say. Oh shoot. I need the color, so let me copy that. All right, there we should have the proper colors. All right, so then we have our inner ear, and there's something a little different about the inner ear is you might be thinking, well, we have 2 ears, so we need an inner ear left and we need an inner ear right. But if you'll see, both of our inner ears are going to be nested under each ear. So we're not going to be positioning it from the head. So we don't need, for instance, this ear, we needed a specific left value to make it stick out to the left, and we needed a specific right value to stick out to the right because it's based off of the head. Whereas this inner ear, we can simply nest that div under the ear left and ear right, and then we'll do 10% from the top, 10% from the left, give it a width of 80%, and that'll give us the look that we need. But because it's going to have the same top and left values for each side because it's nested under the bigger ear. So let's take this inner ear code, copy and paste it. So this inner ear, something we want dead centered. So we want dead center. We want it dead centered on each of our ears. So first we just give it a width of height of 80%, merely because give it the size I wanted. And then we do our formula to dead center, which in this case would be 100 minus 80 divided by 2, give us a top of 10%. Then we do 100 minus our width, we do 100 minus our height of 80, which is also 80, divided by 2, and that gives us our left of 10%. Once we plug those in, that would give us it smack dab in the middle of the ear like we wanted. And then we give it a background. And that completes our inner ear and our ear left and our ear right. Here you'll see that I put z index 1, whereas this head copy we did was z index 2. So because it's lower, it's going behind this head copy. Whereas if we did z index 3 and gave it a larger one that had copy, I'll do ear right, for example, then it's going to come up on top. So let's give that 1. And then again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but if we went ahead and removed this head copy, then the layering like we want wouldn't work. So that is why our head copy is there. All right. So this is what we should have by the end of our ears. And now we're going to go on to our eyes, but let's paste this in here. All right. So our eyes are positioned right underneath our head. So its parent is the head. And then so we position it with the absolute percentage. We give it a background of white, width of 30%, height of 30%, merely by trial and error. And then we have our transformers, our border radius of 50% since it's a circle. Oop. Apparently I didn't cut it, so let's add that back in there. All right. Now, something I do want to mention first is with this top and left, it's not smack dab of our head, so we can't use the formula. Now, you could just do it by trial and error, which I'll be honest, I do a lot of the time. A way that you could be more precise is you could use that dead center formula. So you could do 100 minus the width divided by 2 to get your top, and then 100 minus your height divided by 2 to give you your left. And that would position one eye directly smack dab in the center, and then you could kind of go out from that. So let's just go ahead and do that. So we have 100 minus our width, which is 30%, which is 70, divided that by 2, so 35. would be our top if you wanted smack dab. And then for our left value, we do 100 minus 33 divided by 2, 33.5. So we have an eye smack dab in the middle of our head, and then we could just kind of trial and error once it's already centered. So, we do 30, I check, oh, it's a little higher. Then I might say, oh, I need a little bit higher than that, so go back to 25. And all right, that looks right, but I need to go a little more to the left. So then I would say, well, let me just reduce this a little bit. So let's just try 21. And I'm like, oh, that kind of looks right. And then I would just copy this, paste it, and change it left to the right. But let me fix this. Oh, it was pretty close. It's 21. Okay. So there, that gives us the eyes that we're looking for. Again, the pupil works just like the inner ear does. Even though there's one on each eye, it's going to be nested under eye left and eye right, and it's not going to have a specific left or right value that's different from each other. So we just do one styling class. We're going to guesstimate a width of 28%, a height of 30%. Again, that's going to be a percentage based upon the eye since it's nested under the eye. And then we're going to do smack dab center formula. So I think you kind of understand that now, but it'd be 100 minus the width divided by 2 for your top, and then 100 minus the height divided by 2 for your left. So that's going to give us a 35 and 36. And then our border radius is our transformer, makes it the circle. And then we have our background of that blackish color. The only thing I want to point out that as far as the eyes go before we move on is that we have a z index of 3 for the eye left and a z index of 2 for the eye right. And this was pretty much just came from tinkering with the layers to get the nose to be on top of both the eye left and the eye right. So those are the paths we're going to need. So when we do have our nose with its own z-index value, it's going to be right on top of both these eyes. So next coming up is going to be our brown nose. All right, so position absolute. So we're going to give it a specific percentage for top, percentage for left. Again, this is very redundant, but just want to break this down. The height and width, completely honest, was me tinkering. And I'm pretty sure for this one, I could have done, this one would have made a lot more sense to do dead centered and then adjust it down. I'll be honest, I probably just did trial and error. I don't honestly remember at this point. But then our transformer is not going to be, it's not going to be a 50% because we don't want a circle. We just want to round it. So as a rule of thumb, when you're doing a circle, you could just do border radius and 50%. But when you want to round something down just slightly, you're going to want to do it not by percentage, but by pixels. So if we just do 50 border radius of 50 pixels, that gives us a nice curve like we want, but it's not going to make it a complete circle like if we did 50%. Well, it's not going to look like a circle because it's off, but this oval. So we'll change that. Again, this is just me. It's completely the reason I'm not doing 50% and doing it just a slight rounded rectangle is style preference. But anyways, we have that nose done. The only thing I really want to add is the z index of 4. So it's going to be our highest layer. So it's going to be on top of everything else, above our eyes most importantly. And that is pretty much all we have for the nose. So that brings us to our last two. It's going to be our hair left and hair right. Those are going to be pretty similar to everything else we've done with just one slight difference. And I'm going to remove this and we're going to go through this together. This is our transformer, which I will get to. All right, so I give it its position based off the head, so I want it sticking up a little bit above the head, so I do a negative, push it out, -8%. This right one, just for the looks, I want it to be a little lower, so I only do -4%. Left, both the height and width, and the left and right. No, I think they're both left. So here they're both left. It might have been made more sense to do right just to be less confusing, but this kind of brings up a good point. Is for my general rule of thumb is I only switch to right if it goes above 50%. So 48% from the left is equivalent to 52% from the right. So as a rule of thumb, I always use left, and then if it's going to be I have to go over 50% to position it, then I switch it to right and do it based off from the right. Um, Anyways, I thought it was a good example to show that. We give it our gray color that we need, again, height and width, and the positioning. A lot of it was just tinkering around. That's normal. The last thing we need to do, obviously, is our transformer. Now, we're not doing a rounded rectangle, and we're not doing a circle. We're doing a triangle, which is going to be a pretty unique shape. So how I personally handle all of these shapes is I use a nice tool that's called a Clippy. It's in the description. You can pull it up now. All right, so for this Clippy tool, what it does is you have all different types of shapes that you can get um, on this right, and you can click on them, and it's going to give you a specific the CSS for that. So instead of using border radius, it's going to be a polygon value, and then um, the style. So it's going to be in our CSS, it's going to be clip path, and then the value we're going to give clip path is going to be this polygon, which it generates for us. So for this case, we want triangle. So we can just go ahead and click triangle, copy and paste this, and then paste that into each of our hairs. And voila, there we have it. Our final image is complete. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the background. So this pretty much covers all the basic CSS shapes, and I think this gives you a really good template. So if you want to do something similar, you can keep this box in here. You can, rename head, and then you can kind of base it as far as how you're going to be styling things and kind of tweak this just to kind of get the basic concepts of pure CSS and create your own images. I did include in the description, I do have a pure CSS collection that I have on CodePen. So you can either try to look at the image and try to replicate yourself, or if you need more time to study, you can actually look at the code and now you kind of got the basic understanding of it. Try to see how it works with different examples. You can try to replicate the example with the code yourself, or maybe it'll just serve as inspiration. So hopefully that helps. The last thing I do want to mention is that ideally, instead of here how we had all these individual colors and all these individual transformers, a way we could really clean up our code and make it a lot more reusable as a template is by using variables. Now I'm not going to, so already been a lengthy video, so I'm not going to take the time to explain how to use CSS variables. That's going to be the next video, which I'm going to be doing. But I do have, if you're impatient, I do have an article on Medium that's already published that explains this. So if you don't mind reading instead of listening, you can go ahead and in the description, I have a link to a blog post I wrote where I explain how to use CSS variables and some other organizing tips I have to really clean up your code. But that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope this is really beneficial. Just from my blog posts alone, I've seen a lot of people using this tutorial and making their own images. I've just been blown away by the feedback, so it's very encouraging. So feel free to follow me on CodePen. I've also in the description have my Twitter account. And if you do use this tutorial and you do create something of your own, or even if you just make a replica, let me know. I want to see your work, and I'll give you guys a shout out in return. And yeah, so thanks again for listening to this, and stay tuned for the videos that I'm going to be releasing soon. Thanks.